The story begins with 25th Bam, an irregular who has lived his entire life in a dark cave beneath a mysterious tower, with a girl named Rachel as his only connection to the world above. He did not know the tower's name. He did not know what waited inside it. He only knew Rachel, the one person who had ever spoken to him with kindness, the one light in a life that had known almost nothing else. When Rachel told him she was leaving, that she needed to climb the tower and see the stars she had always dreamed of, Bam did not hesitate. He followed her through the gate not because he wanted stars. He followed because a world without Rachel in it was not a world he understood how to exist in. The Tower of God is a mysterious structure that promises those who reach its top anything they desire: wealth, fame, power, or the stars themselves. What it demands in exchange is survival. The first floor greeted Bam not with welcome, but with a test: a massive white steel eel coiled in a dark hall, and a choice that defined everything that followed. Head-on, the tower's first-floor administrator watched with ancient and unreadable eyes as the boy from below the tower faced something that should have ended him immediately. Bam did not have power. He did not have training. He had something else. Something that made the tower's walls respond in ways they had not responded in a very long time. An irregular had entered, and the tower noticed. The tower introduced concepts that governed everything inside it. Regulars were those chosen by the tower to climb. Rankers were those who had already climbed to great heights. And irregulars were something the tower had not invited, something that entered by force of will alone, and broke the rules simply by existing. Bam was an irregular without knowing what that meant. The other climbers on the second floor were regulars, trained, selected, purposeful. Among them he found people who would become essential to everything that followed. Kun Aguero Agnes, sharp and calculating, and already building strategies before introductions were finished. Rak Wraithrazor, enormous and loud, and committed to hunting the strongest prey he could find. Together, they were improbable. Together, they were something the tower had not seen before. The second floor was a testing ground, designed to eliminate those who did not belong. Each test demanded something different: strategy, combat, trust, the ability to recognize which rules could be bent and which had to be broken entirely. Bam moved through the tests not with the calculated efficiency of the trained regulars around him, but with something more disorienting. He adapted. He absorbed. He connected with people at a speed that made no logical sense given how isolated his entire previous existence had been. The tower's administrators watched him with an attention they did not give to ordinary regulars. And, somewhere above the floors he had not yet reached, people who had been climbing for lifetimes were already being told that something unusual had entered from below. The end of Part 1 delivered a shocking cliffhanger that left readers on edge about Bam's fate. During the crown game, at the moment when everything Bam had been working towards seemed within reach, Rachel pushed him into the water below. Not by accident, not in confusion, deliberately, coldly. The girl he had followed into the tower, the only person who had ever mattered to him, had made a choice that removed him from the game entirely. He sank into the dark water, looking up at her face, and could not make the expression he saw there fit with anything he thought he knew about her. The tower sealed over him, and 25th Bam, the boy who had entered for love, disappeared from the records as if he had never existed. The end of Part 1 delivered a shocking cliffhanger that left readers on edge about Bam's fate. During the crown game, at the moment when everything Bam had been working towards seemed within reach, Rachel pushed him into the water below. Not by accident, not in confusion, deliberately, coldly. The girl he had followed into the tower, the only person who had ever mattered to him, had made a choice that removed him from the game entirely. He sank into the dark water, looking up at her face, and could not make the expression he saw there fit with anything he thought he knew about her. The tower sealed over him, and 25th Bam, the boy who had entered for love, disappeared from the records as if he had never existed. Kun had not believed Bam was dead. That was the thing about Kun. He was too precise, too information-driven to accept conclusions that the evidence did not fully support. He had been climbing since the second floor with the efficiency of someone who had been trained from birth to navigate power structures and exploit their weaknesses. But underneath all the calculation, underneath the strategies and the alliances and the carefully managed image, was a loyalty that had taken root on the second floor and had not loosened since. He was going to find Bam. He was going to pull him back from whatever Fug had made of him. The tower was enormous, and the floors were many, and none of that mattered even slightly. The workshop battle arc brought together the tower's most powerful climbing teams in a tournament hosted by the workshop, the organization that manufactured the weapons and tools that defined power inside the tower. The battle drew everyone together, FUG and their VO, the old friends from the second floor, new allies and enemies gathered from the upper floors, and forces moving in the background whose goals extended far beyond winning any tournament. It was the first time Bam and his former companions came within reach of each other since the betrayal on the second floor. And the reunion, when it finally happened, was not a clean or comfortable thing. Too much had changed. Too much had been done to all of them by a tower that had no interest in sentimental resolutions. Urek's arrival dramatically shifted the tonal and narrative direction of the series. He was a ranker, one of the highest, a man who had climbed the tower at a speed that nobody had matched since Zahad himself, and who carried that achievement with a casual confidence that suggested the tower had been a mild inconvenience rather than a life-defining challenge. He was not subtle. He was not political. He entered the workshop battle, the way natural forces enter spaces, completely and without asking permission. His interest in Bam was immediate and specific. He recognized in the boy from below the tower something that the tower's hierarchy had been dreading for longer than most of the climbers in the arena had been alive. A potential that had no ceiling anyone could identify yet. The Hell Train was not a metaphor. It was a literal train that ran through the tower's internal passages on a fixed route, carrying passengers who had been trying for generations to reach a floor called the 43rd, where a powerful weapon was sealed and waiting. The train attracted the desperate and the ambitious in equal measure. Its inside was a contained world of shifting alliances, impossible tests, and a conductor who had been running the same route for longer than most living things inside the tower had existed. Bam entered it as Gu Violet Grace at the things the train demanded of him, the fights, the choices, the people who chose to stay beside him despite everything FUG had done to shape him into something else, began pulling the person underneath that name back toward the surface. Rachel was not a monster. That was what made her impossible to simply hate and move on from. She was a person who had been told her entire life that she was ordinary in a world that only rewarded the extraordinary. She had wanted the stars with a desperation that had curdled over years into something willing to remove whatever stood between her and the top of the tower. Bam had stood there, not on purpose, not out of malice, simply by being the kind of person the tower responded to in ways it had never responded to her. She had pushed him into the water and told herself it was the only choice available. The tower had given her exactly what she had asked for. Whether it had given her what she actually needed was a different and much harder question. The higher Bam climbed, the more clearly the tower's true structure came into view. Zahad was not just a king, he was the tower's defining fact. The man who had climbed higher than anyone else and used that position to build an empire that controlled every floor beneath him through a combination of absolute power and carefully cultivated mythology. His 10 great families divided the tower's politics between them. His princesses, women given a fraction of his blood, and deployed as instruments of control, held floors and allegiances in ways that nothing short of Bam's particular kind of power could challenge. The tower was not a neutral testing ground. It was a kingdom, and its king had been watching the Irregular from below, with the cold attention of someone who had seen challenges before and had made very specific arrangements for how they ended. Bam's growth over the series was particularly astounding, going from a weak, inexperienced Irregular to someone called a monster and feared by his enemies. His Shinsu was impressive, able to use multiple forms and attack with it in creative ways that trained regulars could not replicate. The tower had been designed around a hierarchy of power that Zahad sat at the top of and everyone else organized beneath. Bam was not climbing that hierarchy. He was building something alongside it, drawing on sources of Shinsu that the tower's established rules said should not be accessible to someone at his floor level. Each major confrontation unlocked another layer. Each thing the tower tried to use to stop him became instead a step upward. The ceiling the tower thought it had placed over him did not seem to exist from his side. The upper floors of the tower were a landscape of allegiances that shifted with the political winds of Zahard's empire and the counter-movements that had been building against it for generations. People Bam had trusted revealed complicating histories. People he had fought found reasons to stand beside him. The tower had a way of making simple things complicated and complicated things simple in alternating and unpredictable patterns. Through all of it, the core of what Bam was remained consistent in a way that occasionally infuriated the people around him. He kept extending trust past the point that strategy justified. He kept finding reasons to protect people who had hurt him. The tower had given him power. It had not been able to give him a different kind of heart. The 43rd floor held more than a weapon. It held pieces of the tower's actual history, the version that Zahard's official mythology had carefully buried under centuries of controlled narrative. What the tower was, what it had been before Zahard climbed it, what waited at the very top that had been powerful enough to make a man who reached it build an entire empire just to make sure nobody else ever got there. Bam stood in the middle of revelations that rewrote the frame around everything he had experienced since entering from below. He had come in chasing a person. He was beginning to understand that the tower had been waiting for something, and that whatever it had been waiting for had been born in a cave beneath it and had no memory of why. The war against Zahard's army grew in scale with each new arc, introducing new characters, forcing new allegiances, and bringing back old foes in configurations that the earlier floors had not made possible. Bam had not set out to lead a revolution. He had set out to find Rachel, to understand what the tower was, to become strong enough to protect the people who kept choosing to stand beside him, despite every reason the tower gave them to step away. But the things he had done in climbing had made him a symbol whether he wanted the role or not. An irregular who climbed on his own terms, a challenge to the idea that Zahard's position was permanent and natural and beyond question. The coalition that gathered around that challenge was imperfect and fractious and absolutely committed. The war began in earnest. Rachel had been climbing through the war's chaos with the specific focus of someone who had already decided that other people's conflicts were obstacles rather than causes. She had been given tools by forces who found her useful precisely because she was willing to do things that people with Bam's particular kind of heart would not. Her final gambit was not motivated by hatred or ideology. It was motivated by the same hunger that had driven her since before she ever knew Bam's name: the stars. The top of the tower, the thing she had decided she deserved regardless of the cost. The war gave her cover. She used it with the efficiency of someone who had been quietly calculating for a very long time. The upper floors of the tower became less like physical spaces and more like ideas given architecture, vast and strange and structured around principles that the lower floors had only hinted at. Bam moved through them carrying everything the climb had cost him and built into him simultaneously the friends who had survived, the truths about the tower he now carried, the specific weight of being the kind of person the tower had not been designed to accommodate and had been unable to stop. The top was close enough now to feel, not as a place but as a threshold, the line between what the tower's history had been and what Bam's presence inside it was going to make it become. He kept climbing. There was nothing else to do with the momentum of everything that had brought him here. Zahard had climbed the tower first, had built his empire from the top down, had spent centuries making sure no one else reached what he had reached, and found what he had found waiting there. He looked at Bam with the recognition of someone who had known this moment was coming for longer than Bam had been alive, and had built entire systems to prevent it, and had watched those systems fail one by one as an irregular from below the tower climbed with a stubbornness that no political structure could fully account for. The fight was not between two people. It was between two ideas about what the tower was for, what power meant, and whether the thing at the very top belonged to the man who had locked it away or to everyone who had ever been told the climb was not for them. The stars were real. That was the first thing. Whatever Rachel had told him about them, whatever the tower's mythology had built around them, they were real, and they were there, and they were exactly as vast and indifferent and beautiful as anything that enormous had to be. Bam stood at the top of a structure that had consumed his entire existence and looked at a sky that had been waiting above it the whole time. He had not climbed for the stars. He had climbed for a person, and then for the people who gathered around him, and then for the truth about what the tower was and what he was inside it. The stars had been there regardless of his reasons. He looked at them for a long time, and somewhere in the tower below, the climb continued for everyone else who had ever looked up and decided that the top was worth the cost of reaching it. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments.